Thanks for asking me to be here, and it's fun. I'm seeing some other friends while here. I wasn't quite sure who all might be in attendance, Charlie, Shabir, others here. Yeah, I have to admit too, when Dave reached out, I was a bit perplexed, and I even felt more so this morning. I'm probably the least technical person in this building, so please be aware of that. So I'll bring hopefully a little bit of the perspective of those things that Dave referenced about me. Some things in which I've been involved over the years, been in the private sector, the government side, not-for-profit with chairing a think tank here in Indiana and some other things like that. Sort of a confluence maybe of experiences, and I'll just go with maybe that's why Dave asked me to be here. This is something, I talked with Tracy, your last speaker. Tracy and I are colleagues at the state. I run this agency and he runs IoT. And I said to him, Tracy, I don't know if you realize the impact you have every time we have a cabinet meeting with the governor. And he kind of looked at me, and I'll sort of interpret it. Allow me one word here. I basically looked at him and said, you scare the hell out of me every time you talk with us. I said, between you and Department of Homeland Security, I go back to our senior team and say, look, y'all, we better be paying attention to this. And I am very serious about it. In fact, we have made cybersecurity a KPI for the Commission for Higher Education. And part of the reason is, and this is nothing new to all of you, I know we have exposure. Whether it's in agriculture, I think you were discussing agriculture earlier today, whether it's in advanced manufacturing where I spent 20 years, whether it's in finance, across the board and in all sectors we have exposure, including in government. Our agency keeps track of hundreds of thousands of students in Indiana. We also administer nearly $500 million in financial aid. You can start thinking of those things that could be at risk because of cybersecurity. So we take it very seriously. I think it also presents for Indiana a real opportunity. I've been meeting with Anderson University leaders, certainly Ivy Tech, where I spent nearly a decade. My primary role there was to stand up the workforce side of the college and then lead it and hire great folks like Shabir to do really good work there. But I think we have an opportunity here in Indiana to think big, to think like North Carolina, thinking about a network of higher education, business, philanthropy, the not-for-profit sector, education. By the way, I'll share with all of you, I've coined a phrase in the last couple of years of a Pentagon partnership. In fact, it's actually something formal we're doing at the Commission now for the last roughly year. And it is distinctly to bring together business, government, education, philanthropy, and the not-for-profit world. Because I'm convinced that each one of those areas of our society has a distinct strength that the others don't necessarily have. That if it's a nonprofit that's a community and faith-based organization, leaders and individuals in those areas have much better reach into the community than I'll ever have. And that someone who is leading and operating a business, responsible for profit and loss, responsible to shareholders and so forth, has a different perspective and view than I do. So all of that to say, I believe strongly that Indiana could be positioned if we think a little differently about how we might come together as higher education institutions, as government, business, and so forth to catalyze something significant here. I wouldn't be an education person if I didn't start with a little quiz, right? I'll start with one and end with one, and no grades will be taken, so I assure you of that, especially if you are a student. Raise your hand if you have been, I'm cautious, I won't use the word victim, and I'll share why in a moment. If you have been subject to some cyber breach or challenge personally in your own life or within the area of your work. Okay. Frankly, I'm surprised it's not even more, but that's pretty significant. After Dave asked me to do this, I thought, yeah, cybersecurity, and I preach about it a lot at work, and then I went, oh, wait, but I've been hit by it too. 2 months into the pandemic, I was notified, I was still at Ivy Tech at that time, I was notified by our CFO that someone in the California prisons system was filing for unemployment for me. And I said, well, that's interesting because I'm working 70 to 80 hours a week during this blasted pandemic. And, right, fortunately that was caught. A couple other people were hit by that too. And certainly other things, you know, where I've been hit. A few years ago, this think tank that I was chairing, of which I was chairing the board, you know, one of those crazy kind of things. It's not a big organization. They weren't housed in a large facility. The CEO was on the second floor, and imagine literally the distance from here to the door there. And the controller was on the other floor, and the controller received an email directly from the CEO. Wait, it wasn't from the CEO because that CEO's email had been hacked. And a $48,000 check or distribution was redirected to, you guessed it, a bank account to which it was not supposed to be directed. We never recovered the money, and $48,000 for a relatively small, few $1 million a year revenue organization was felt. Anyway, you all get that, and it's part of the reason I take so seriously, even more so with what Tracy shares with us on a regular basis. So real quickly, why is this person from higher ed talking with you? I'm going to try to weave together a little bit of my own agenda. So Charlie Hiltunen, who's here, I know helped put all this together and probably responsible for getting me here as much as anyone. Maybe it's because we've known each other for 40 years, Charlie, right? Charlie calls and I just say, sure, where and when. But, I thought this is also an opportunity to weave in for all of you a bit of the agenda for the Commission for Higher Education, because I think it relates directly to what you're talking about here. Cybersecurity, in my view, is a challenge and it's an opportunity. I mentioned earlier that I wouldn't say I've been a cyber victim. I'm very cautious about using that word because my guess is, to some degree, for whatever has occurred to me, whether it's with credit cards, bank accounts, et cetera, there has been some lapse in my own behavior that somewhere along the line was a predicate to those challenges. Not certain of that, but I also don't want to be arrogant enough to think that I'm doing everything correctly and someone else is the cause for a cybersecurity lapse that involves me. So part of the agenda that I wanted to share with you is that we know that here in Indiana, it's across the nation, but here in Indiana, with educational attainment, we see some very positive signs. And some of those positive signs, though, I think present a challenge for cyber and for security of our businesses, our state, and our nation. And here's why. In Indiana, some recent data tell us that if you have less than a high school diploma, you have an unemployment rate of about 6 or 7%. And if you have a high school diploma, it's roughly 4.5%. I'm giving you some close numbers because they change a bit from month to month. And if you have an associate degree or higher, it's starting to be in the range of 2.5 or 3%. And if you have a bachelor's degree and higher, you see where this is headed, right? Probably less than 2%. In recent months, it's even been 0.9%. So you get that, right? Then, when we're more selective about the sectors and the specific jobs, it gets even more constrained. And you know that with information technology. Information technology, computer science, cybersecurity, those 0.9% unemployment rates are virtually they're non-existent. If you have those kind of credentials, you know this, you can almost walk around the block in a city and get a better job at a higher pay. I really don't think that's exaggerating. And that presents a challenge for our state, not just in the way we might think about that, but when we consider this. In Indiana, in the last decade, we've had a decline in the college going rate. So those are individuals leaving high school and going to our colleges and universities for some form of training or education. That's a problem. Dropping from 65% to 53% in just 5 years. So 12 points. It dropped 15 points in 10 years. So that's a problem. We've done well at improving our rate of completion. So that's a good sign, right? We're getting students in, and I believe very strongly our universities and colleges are doing a really good job of helping students complete at a much better rate than had been the tradition. In fact, we're 13th best in the nation. That's pretty good. I want us to be top 10 or 15 in a lot more things with higher education. But it's not good enough yet, and those improvements in completions aren't making up for the decline in the college going rate. And then the third thing that we find as a challenge in Indiana is that in spite of our institutions, those represented here, 29 private institutions in the state of Indiana, 7 public institutions. I was telling somebody, it might have been Charlie before we started this event today, that when you count all of the locations of all of our institutions, the number of campuses or sites number more than our number of counties in Indiana. We're very accessible. Higher education is available to citizens in Indiana. But back to this challenge. Our institutions, I should also give you this asterisk. I'm a believer in the markets. I think the markets tell us a lot. The markets are very blunt, and they're very truthful. And in this regard, Indiana is very fortunate. Indiana is 9th best in the nation. Now we're at top 10. I love this. We're 9th best in the nation at our institutions attracting students from other states. Wow, right? So now all of you and like 17 other people in the state know that. So, right? So I'm trying to say this where 2 or more people are gathered and where anyone from the media, if you're from the media, can we talk later, will listen. That's really good. And the primary factors are this. Our institutions are very good, very high quality, and have wonderful programs, including things like cybersecurity or marketing, Clayton, who's around here. Lots of different programmatic offerings. So very high quality. And by the way, compared to most states, we're also very affordable. I'll give you another number. We hear and read a lot about affordability, and it's a factor. It is absolutely a factor, and we're pushing on it like crazy so that our institutions stay as affordable as possible. So a couple of facts, though. Indiana's #1 in the Midwest and 5th in the nation in need-based financial aid. I heard somebody go, whew. I agree. That's a big deal. So all of you, please help me share that story. The other thing is, and we track our public institutions, we just don't track the private in this regard. In the last decade, while most institutions have been, to some degree, even significantly raising their tuition and fees, our state is 6th best in the nation at holding the line on tuition and fees. And when you adjust it for inflation, not including the most recent spate of inflation, because it would be even better, we're at -2% in raising our tuition and fees at our public institutions. 6th best in the nation. I know, right? So we're going to start talking more about that. So now the other side of that coin is we're 9th best in the nation. We have relative affordability. We have great institutions like those represented here. Oh, but here's that other side. We're 42nd at retaining our graduates once they complete. So that's the challenge, and we're going to address it. And so we've been doing a number of things at the commission in the last year and a half to identify these challenges, not to, wring our hands about them or just admire the problem, but rather to say, what can we do about them? So I think all of these I'm sharing with all of you relate very much to this topic you're addressing here today. Talent, we have to have talent. And to the degree that our supply is constrained by our college going rate, the need to improve our completion rates even more and to retain our students once they have completed, it is exacerbating for the entire labor market, and even more so for the labor market about which you're talking today. So I think it commands something very different. When Dave was saying those kind remarks, I guess those were probably provided to you by our office, somebody in the communications team who put those together. They hate when I say that. They probably should. But you mentioned, Dave, and it was nice talking about doing some speaking at the state and national level. Perhaps one of the most fun events I ever attended, because it was just sort of all over the board, was a couple of years ago called the Touching Tomorrow Symposium. I think that was the name of it. And it was sponsored by a philanthropic organization. And I was asked to speak about the future of higher education. And there's nothing provocative about that, right? And one of the things that I challenged the audience with was this. On that particular morning, my phone's up there. I pulled up stocks that I track on a regular basis and looked at a half a dozen companies with which people would typically be familiar. Little companies like Apple and Microsoft and Amazon, Google Alphabet. Now, by the way, throw in NVIDIA and a couple of others, right? And at the time I said, the top half a dozen companies have a market capitalization of something like $7 trillion with a T, right? And that if those leaders wake up on Monday morning and say, we own higher education, they will own higher education. Because they'll move at the speed of business. In fact, those companies will move at the speed of tech, and they will address things very differently, rightly or wrongly. But in that, my point was, I think we have an opportunity with higher education, and I think this is especially so with this topic, to think differently about our partners. How do we think about even those companies I just mentioned? How do we think about the blending of the work of a four-year institution here in Indiana, a private, with the community college, with a local government, with a tech startup somewhere in our state? How do we think differently about the funding sources? How do we think differently about the curriculum? How do we think differently about getting a student through at lightning speed? I had a little something to do with, I wish I could claim more credit, but it just wouldn't be the truth. When I was at Ivy Tech, we created the Cyber Academy. And is anybody familiar with the MUTC Cyber Academy? Look it up, it's fascinating. Yes, some of you I know are. Have you heard of the Muscatatuck Urban Training Center in Indiana? Look that up too. It's just crazy fascinating. It is in rural Indiana, sort of south central Indiana near North Vernon. And it's been a Department of Defense site for many years. And it's an urban warfare training center. And they have a fake embassy, and they have a subway, and they are able to block out communications from any place else. Little groups like the Department of Defense, National Security Agency, FBI, CIA, and others use it. And it is really cool. And now for a few years, there has been a cyber academy there where students can go and be residential, living in this crazy place, and earn multiple industry certifications, technical certificates, and so forth, up through an associate degree in an accelerated pathway of 11 months. An associate degree normally takes at least 2 years. All of this in 11 months in conjunction with and in partnership with the Department of Defense. I share that with you. Again, I had like this much to do with it. It was only because I oversaw that part of the college and really smart people who knew what they were doing, like Chancellor Combs in Columbus, who has a military background of his own. Those were the folks who came forward and said, you know, we got this crazy idea. And I listened to it and I thought, I don't think it's crazy. You know, when can we go do this now? It's NSA certified. I guess Homeland Security certification comes with that. I'm told FBI certification and so forth comes with it. But my point is, how can we look at some of these challenges and bring others to the table to accelerate that pace of change? So you heard part of my agenda. I'm trying to get more students to do something, and I don't mean just a four-year degree following high school, certifications, four-year degree, associate degree, whatever that might look like, to address some of these challenges. So how do we think about getting in front of students. Did you know, I don't know if she's in here, I think she is in the back room there, the leader of K-12 from NSA is here. I don't know if you've met her, you should, because K-12 is where the pipeline's going to start, and getting students interested in and engaged. So what might we be doing with K-12 in our communities, near our universities and colleges, in our towns, in our parts of the state, to get those folks engaged? And how might the local government be involved? And again, how might the local business be involved? Hillenbrand, where I spent 20 years, is not a tech company, but it's a tech company, right? I worked in the corporate headquarters for 4 years. I think this is interesting. It's a 4-story building. On each of those floors, except one, various departments share the floor. You know, finance and legal and, I don't know, marketing are one floor, and, you know, these departments are on this floor, et cetera. There's only one part, at least from my knowledge I still have, of a part of that company that occupies an entire floor. That is, did I just lose sound? Yep. I think I just lost sound.
I'll tell you what, I'll trade you out.
Oh, that'll work.
There you go. Mute that one, turn that one on.
Okay, you can hear me. You just thought you were lucky. But, you know, I think of this, you know, very buttoned up, and I get to say that. I used to pitch their stock. That was part of my portfolio there. But, you know, this very sort of conservative, you know, great long-term investment kind of publicly traded company. But of all the areas of that company, only one actually occupies all of one floor in that facility. And it's their information technology part of their business that runs their business. That's not what they sell. That's not what they do. So anyway, you get that point. So how can we think differently about that? You know, looking at some of these challenges, let me share with you ways in which at the Commission we've been looking at and addressing the college going rate, improving the completion rates, and then thinking about retaining our graduates. And I share this again because I'm being very selfish, and I want you to think about these because they're also big issues for Indiana. But again, I think they are exacerbated for parts of the marketplace like this, where the supply is even more constricted. Getting ready for this, I asked some folks on our team, I said, so give me some numbers. I love numbers. We're very data oriented at the Commission now. We're doing return on investment analyses on everything we put forward as a proposal. Frankly, I refuse to take something forward if we're asking, can we do this or this, without being able to look at all of you as taxpayers, policymakers, and others and say, look, here's the return on investment. And I was told just in this space, just in the state of Indiana, the expected job openings between now and over the next decade, 2023 to 2033, will range anywhere from 6,000 to 12,000 consistently open jobs in this space. Right, and you can sort of see the slope of the curve, and it has a little bump in it at some place. I can't recall exactly why that was, but right, that is pretty significant. And again, just to, you know, scare you a bit, if we have a continued decline in the college going rate, it's going to just be tougher. So some things we've been doing, and I'd ask for your consideration to think about how this work plugs in to all of that. And of course, you might have guessed by now, I'll give you suggestions, because I'm really shy, of ways to maybe consider these things if you haven't thought of them yourself. So last year, when we were looking at these challenges of the college going rate, one of the things that we looked at was something called the 21st Century Scholars Program. If you're a student and you're a 21st Century Scholar, would you mind raising your hand? I love it. Thank you. And we met in the hall, and thank you. I think the 21st Century Scholars Program is one of the premier things that the state of Indiana does. It's 33 years in existence, and the deal is you have to be signed up by the time you're finished with 8th grade, and it is income-based principally, and then you have to do certain things while you're in high school, 12 things. I call them the good student and good citizen checklist, right? You could probably tell the crowd even better than I could. So it's just this wonderful, wonderful program that provides full tuition to our state institutions, a great deal to private institutions, and then the institutions help come along with other financial aid to help the student. Because what we also know is that in Indiana, while the college going rate is 53%, for low-income students it's 30%. But low-income students who are 21st century scholars, it's 81%. Ah, yeah, that's right. So we're starting to see in the data some glimmers of hope. And we went to the governor, legislators, business people, philanthropy, et cetera, last year and said, hey, we've got this crazy idea. For, at that point, 32 years, we've had to find these students and sign them up. And it's really hard. And we were only getting signed up, as of the last time, I think it was 48% of eligible students. And I don't know about you, but that just absolutely kills me. So I was the new guy, and I just, right, Charlie knows this about me, I just asked the stupid question. And so I asked this stupid question, I said, so do we have a pretty good idea who these students are? And the answer was, well, yeah, you know, we're pretty sure who all the students are. And I said, well, here's the stupid question. Why wouldn't we just automatically enroll these kids? You know, and I think somebody older looked at me, some of you young people may not know this, and said, I should have had a V8. And I said, yeah, like if we know who they are, why wouldn't we just sign them up? So I'll tell you what happened. Everybody in the legislature agreed. It's sort of a rare moment, you know this, right? That something's bipartisan, like with alacrity. And it was bipartisan, passed. We do this now, and so I'll tell you the difference here. But think about how you can consider cyber, young people in middle school and high school, and leading them to these careers. We consider someone done being a student of that grade on June 30th. So a kid who was an 8th grader this last academic year was done being an 8th grader on June 30th. So that's sort of the count. In 2022, we as a state, the schools, our agency and others were able to sign up about 19,900 kids, 2022, sign up, having to go out and find every one of them, 19,900 kids in 2022. So we flipped the switch in 2023, right? And on June 30th of this year, we signed up more than 46,600. Huh. That's the kind of impact we can have. And so I share that with you because we've got to start talking with those same kids. We've got to start saying, what if perhaps you were a 21st century scholar and not only is, you know, tuition paid for or this paid for, et cetera, but maybe as an institution we offer even something more, perhaps in the way of work and learn experiences that are guaranteed for every cybersecurity student, or some type of stipend. By the way, I'm totally making these things up just speaking with you, but what if we were creative and said, now that's a group of students who's motivated, they're being given a construct of these 12 initiatives they need to pursue to be really good students and be well prepared, but what if we thought of them in that regard? I think it's a great opportunity for us. Something else we've done is to put our foot on the gas of something called the Indiana College Core. And I would challenge you to think about how you might think of that as you think about students coming in and then completing some form of education and training and then staying right here in Indiana. So the College Core has been in existence for 12 years, and what it is a block of 30 dual credit hours that our state institutions must take in total when a student completes those in high school. Because the problem had been for many years, a kid would complete 25 or 30 or 35 hours and then the institution would kind of cherry pick. So this came into existence, and what it requires is the state institutions to accept that. And as I said earlier, stating for the jury, I'm a markets person. I believe the markets work. Well, guess what? Many of the private institutions also accept that now too, because it frankly makes sense for them too. The reason I mention this is because those students have an even higher rate of matriculation. It exceeds 90%, the students who complete this, of going to an institution for some form of training or education post-high school. our challenge was, as of 2 years ago, August, only 84 of our 500 plus high schools in Indiana offered that. And when I saw that, I kind of went, I don't get it. What, like, why are we not doing this? And we just hadn't paid a lot of attention to it, I would say. It's literally like sliced bread. We ought to be making sure that every student has this opportunity. So we put together a strategic initiative to work with the high schools to implement this. So as of last August of 2022, we were up to 141. We went from, so by the way, it took 10 years to get to 84. That's 16% of our high schools. It took one more year to get to 141 because we put some focus on it. It was a KPI. This August, we were at 222, and our goal is to exceed 500 by 2 years from now. So I ask you, again, thinking of your own local high schools and so forth, how might you work with that local high school to say, could we have access to, could we talk with, could we get in front of the kids who are pursuing this Indiana College Core? I think it's a good idea. And again, thinking of how might we treat them a little differently. Charlie and I know each other from our days as undergrads at Indiana University. And something I refer to all the time is how can we treat students, whether they're doing the Indiana College Core, whether they're 21st century scholars, whether they are kids in the FFA, whatever that is, how can we let them know that we want to pay as much attention to them as Indiana University does to a basketball recruit? Right? I mean, for goodness sakes. And again, like, this is something really cool. By the way, you don't want me talking about it with a student, but somebody who, really gets this space and who can communicate with her or him. A couple of other things, and I shared some of those earlier with you. Indiana has been doing well in some spaces, and we just need to shred the Hoosier humility. Number one in the Midwest, need-based financial aid, 5th in the nation, 6th in holding down our cost, 9th at attracting, 13th best at completions. So we got to start talking about that. The other thing we have to do, I think, is decomplicate the process. I don't know about you. I think sometimes people think so. You've kind of poked a little bit, Chris, at higher ed over the last couple of years, and it is only meant with respect. I have the utmost respect for higher education, and literally ran to this when I was recruited, because I think it is the channel by which we'll see greater economic and social flourishing in Indiana. It absolutely is. The data bear that out, and I'll mention some of that again to you in a moment. But our team and I were talking a year or so ago about this challenge of the going rate and some of this other, our post-secondary attainment. By the way, when you look at associate degrees and higher, in 2009 we were ranked 39th in the nation by the Lumina Foundation. And when you look at the most recent data, associate degree and higher, we're ranked 40th. That's not moving the needle. But let's not admire the problem, right? Because we know the challenge is going rate, keeping the gas on completion, and then keeping the students here once they've completed, because I think this is the greatest state in the nation. I've lived here 60 of my 61 years, and I think everybody ought to live here. But we've got to show students that. So we were talking about this challenge of the marketplace and what a student has to go through. We have a son who's 33, a daughter who's 29. They've been through the process, undergrad, graduate, so forth. And it's a challenge. Where do I want to go? What do the funding sources look like? What are the opportunities? What's the job market? What are the hot jobs? Well, this space, to call these hot jobs is just a significant understatement, and it's going to be, likely for decades. So anyway, we started something sort of with some baling wire and some duct tape, and it's a pre-admission strategy. And if you have a senior in high school in your home, there's a high likelihood that she or he received a letter within the past few weeks from this bureaucrat in Indianapolis letting her or him know of the different public and private institutions to which she or he would likely be accepted in Indiana. So he stole this idea from Idaho, research and development, right? Rip off and duplicate. And it's Friday morning, trying a little humor there. So Idaho, I think, was the first. Minnesota did it. I think we were the third or fourth, and now Georgia's making a bunch of noise about it in New York, and because they say they're going to go out and do this, and I'm going, no, we're already doing it. But what we did was approach the institutions, the higher ed institutions, and said, look, if you would like to jump on board, and we gave them like this much time, more than 3/4 of the institutions said, hey, we'll jump in the first year, and we said, great. I think almost all will be in next year. And said, you tell us if you have a threshold, GPA and or SAT. You tell us what the formula is. We are indifferent to it. And then worked with the Department of Education, got access to the students' SATs. Basically every junior in the state of Indiana takes the SAT. And then worked with the school corporations. We won't have to work with all of them individually next year on the GPA side of it. So long story short, here's what happened. We were able to reach 56,000 of the roughly 70 or so thousand seniors in high school this year with a letter. The average student was told that she or he would be provisionally accepted to 24 of our public or private institutions in Indiana, and here's the list of them, where most kids are applying to 4, 5, 6 schools. Unfortunately, 2 or 3 of those out of state. That always just irritates me because I want them to stay here. And I share that with you because when we talked about the idea, we really felt compelled to move quickly on it. And I think our team at first thought we needed to make it perfect. And we had that discussion about let's not let perfect get in the way of good. I said, let's get 80% this year. And so we have reached over whatever that percentage is, 85 or 80% or so of the high school students, and I think 75 or 80% of all the institutions, the higher ed institutions, are participating, and students are starting to see that they have a lot more options. And then it comes home, right, with sort of the anecdotal, and I had to have some tests the other day, just a medical thing, and a nurse practitioner and I were talking, and if we spend 3 minutes together, we're going to talk, okay? I'm going to ask you everything about you, and right, we're going to have a conversation. And so I got into this conversation with Kelly, the nurse practitioner. She has a senior in high school. And I said, so what's your senior going to do? And she mentioned that her son had interest in these 2 institutions, both of which are very good. One's private, one's public here in Indiana. And then she says, and then we got this letter. And I said, oh, you did? And she said, yeah, and he could get into all these schools in Indiana, a lot of which he didn't even know existed. I said, that is fascinating. and of course, by the time we were done, I said, I just have to tell you, because this would just be ornery if I didn't. I said, I sent that letter. And she went, what? So then it was interesting. I talked with her and I said, so how much information have you gotten? How much information has your student gotten, your child? And the bottom line was, she said, not enough. I said, I agree. I tend to think however much information he had received was probably not enough. On careers, on schools, on grants and scholarships, financial aid, and all of that. So bringing it back to this, I think there is more opportunity there. How do we reach through our local schools? How do we reach through our local communities more students for this? How do we look for those rare combinations? And I think I'm about out of time, Dave. Okay. And I only have about 12 more pages. No, just kidding. Nobody will be here, but I'll have my 12 pages. How can we work much more creatively with, again, the entities with which we ought to be working? Whether we're an institution and we're saying, yeah, we could partner, public and private. We could partner 4-year and 2-year. Organizations that don't necessarily look like a higher ed institution and incorporate those. I'm picking on him. Shabir, who is here from Ivy Tech, created the new, Shabir, I'll mess this up, but the IT Academy. They have a cyber academy, but he created a cyber academy. They had to get me out of there to move forward with it a couple of years ago, to think differently and to say, look, this might include certifications only for a student. It might be an associate degree that's fully transferable to a bachelor's degree at one of the other institutions, and just took a very different, I think, business platform approach to what they're doing. So if you want to know more about it, talk with him. He's up there in the corner. So I think we have to consider those things differently. So we talked about the number of open jobs and that 6,000 to 12,000 range, over at least the next decade on an annual basis, only in Indiana. That's only in that space, right? Because in other computer science, information technology, informatic, the collective space, there are other specific career and job category areas that are very similar. So part of my admonition to all of us is to think about that supply side of this, and also to think about what commonly gets referred to as the work and learn side of it. I don't care if you call it an internship, I don't care if you call it a co-op, an externship. I do love the youth apprenticeship model. Anyone familiar with some of the European youth apprenticeship models in here? You're going to be hearing and seeing much more about it. I would suggest you learn more about it, and specifically the Swiss youth apprenticeship model. I think they have a very interesting system in which the majority of their students in what we would consider junior and senior years of high school do a youth apprenticeship. And it's those years and one more year, 3 years, and it covers the broad range of every career pathway. So it's not just what sometimes we in the US think of as traditional skilled trades or maybe even in manufacturing or something like that, all of which are great. But it's everything. Banking, it is the #1 supply source for banking in Switzerland. And you might know they're also the largest banking entity on the planet, as a nation. And so the youth apprenticeship model is quite unique in that the student spends time doing what they would call theoretical learning, the classroom learning, and then the practical, which is the hands-on, in the workplace for a solid 3 years. But part of the beauty to it is they have made it, and again using their words, permeable between the youth apprenticeship model and university, or between university and the apprenticeship model, and in making it very easy to traverse between all of those and allow the student to have that educational experience, have that work experience, have that ability to grow, up through doctorates and so forth. So again, more, I guess, prompting for all of us to think about how we might do that. Dave, I think I probably have to wrap up here. There are other comments I'd like to make, but so this is sort of back to a quiz. Start the class with a quiz and end the class with a quiz. Everyone, raise your hand in the room. I referenced this company a little earlier. I'm guessing this crowd has a perspective. Raise your hand if you know who NVIDIA is. Great, good. They passed the $1 trillion market cap threshold this year. Crazy. But I think part of what is instructive to us is to think about the speed at which we need to move. I would say, state for the jury, I spent 2 decades in business, and so oftentimes I will say, look, especially in parts of higher ed, we have to move at the speed of business. And in this instance, I don't think that's fast enough. We have to move at the speed of cyber. We have to move at the speed of what's happening in our society. It's impacting government and business and individual lives. And when you look at the trajectory of NVIDIA, it's breathtaking. Another question, how many people have on their phones ChatGPT? How many have 4.0? Great. Pitch me later, okay? I've just got it's 3.5, isn't it, the other version? I think that's an example of something where it's sort of easy to be fearful of it. But on the other hand, we just have to understand it. It's not going away, is I think my view, our view. And rather than being, too concerned about it, I think we have to be, concerned and be smart, but rather, what are the implications for it? So I'll close it with this. My wife and I were on vacation last week, and we were with our very best friends, a couple that's about our age and been great friends forever, and we vacationed together and so forth. And we were having this discussion, 4 people with 4 very different views about artificial intelligence. And I won't tell you where my wife landed on that scale there. We've been married 38 years, and that's part of the reason I'm not telling you. It's working out somehow. I think it's fair to say I was probably the person leaning into it most. And there were questions about how might it be used, and I picked up, we had laying there, hard copies of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. It's what I get at home, and that's what I pick up at the little store that's near where we typically stay. And so I picked out a few different stories. And so I asked ChatGPT, I'm glad to share it with you, you'd like to read it. I said, please give me a 700-word story regarding Russia, Africa, the automotive industry, and an economic recession. And in something like 38 seconds, it gave it to me. And my wife's a writer, by the way, and does a column, and has been in some few national publications and things. Well, she read it. By the way, she's also a former English teacher, a retired English teacher. She said, this is stunning. And I said, it is, isn't it? The grammar, the storyline, the intrigue, it was pulling me in. And I share that with you because, again, I think, especially as we think about the talent pipeline, the supply, you all know the cool and exciting things about what students can help solve and address much better than I can ever give a shot at. But getting to those students, having business leaders at the side of you when you're doing that, having philanthropy come in when they need to. By the way, we didn't even talk about philanthropy. I think folks in philanthropy are often underappreciated thought leaders, and they're also venture capitalists for social change, right? They can fund some things for a while until we convince business or government to do likewise. So thinking about reaching students, thinking about partnering as institutions, thinking about knitting together this hub, this network that Charlie and I and others are talking about. I guess my last point in that is for us to embrace these changes, for us to embrace what is certainly different and going to only accelerate at a more rapid pace, and get students enthused about it. I think this is the new frontier. I think if I were smarter and much younger, I would be so interested in this. And I think it would be, like fishing in a well-stocked pond with the best bait you could imagine. So thanks for allowing me to be here. Thanks for allowing me to share a little bit with you about what some of our challenges and opportunities are in the state. I have to plug this really quickly, Dave, before I sit down. We had some encouraging news to share just a couple of days ago this week. I mentioned that college going rate has been dropping for over a decade, and we're really pushing to see what the leading indicators are. This is encouraging because I always like to close with the good news. The college going rate, data for which we only have most recently 2 years ago, has bottomed out. We've quit the decline and it flattened, so that's encouraging. Even more encouraging than that, for the first time in 13 years, enrollment at our public and private institutions in the state of Indiana is up. We got a long way to go, but it's headed in the right direction. And I think by catalyzing and really talking about such great opportunities as we are in this space, being innovative, reaching students, working with our partners, I think we'll see even greater change. And you all know that means economic and social, greater opportunities for economic and social mobility and prosperity especially for our young people in the state of Indiana and for our communities. Thanks for allowing me to be here. Dave, thank you. Yeah, look forward to lunch and chatting with more of you.